Hi everybody, and welcome to our next video. In this video, we're going to do a little bit more work with some formulas and also just some intro terms that you should be comfortable with using as well from a more business perspective. So I have open here one of the documents that is provided to you with your textbook. So it just has some basic information here, and then it does have a sales report information as well, which we'll get to in a minute. So I added an extra sheet at the bottom just so I could talk to you guys about some key terms here. And these are all on your text, but these are ones that, maybe you should take some notes on or write down. You can take notes on paper. I like paper. I'm a little bit old school like that. But you could also create notes for yourself, create an extra sheet sometimes, and they kind of keep them there in Excel. That works too. Or you can just kind of keep a running tab of definitions. I have a lot of students who like to do that. They'll kind of use the back cover of a notebook or something like that to keep tabs of really popular definitions or formulas that they're going to have to come back to a lot. So here, these are all on your text, but I do want to talk about them briefly. So the first concept is the idea of gross sales. So gross sales are the total amount of sales income. When we use that word gross, we basically mean whatever's coming in and not thinking about the stuff that's coming out of there. So don't think about your costs. If we think about when we get paid, we talk about salary, your gross salary is what you earn before they take out things like taxes and insurance and all that sort of stuff. So your gross sales is basically what's coming in from your sales. So let's say you have a store and you're selling items, and that's the business perspective. Now, there's lots of costs that go along with that. So we've broken them into two categories here. So cost of sales. So this is the cost of actually supplying those items that you are selling. And then you have operating expenses. So operating expenses are typically more of a fixed cost or fixed costs that you have to pay to run the department, the store, your business, etc. So for instance, if I have a store, I have to pay heat, right? I have to pay rent and those sort of things, which are not connected directly to the items that I'm selling. So when you think about operating expenses, you want to think more general. So what other costs do you have that you actually have to pay in your business that are not directly related to the items that you're selling? Now, your net profit or loss is when you actually take your gross sales and you subtract out all of your costs. So basically you take your income, so anything coming in minus any costs going out. So for this sheet, again, we're going to see gross sales as our income, and then we're going to subtract both the cost of sales and operating costs. Now, how your book does it is they add those costs together first using parentheses, and then they subtract out the total costs altogether. But you could also subtract them one at a time as well, and that would still be correct. And then the number of items sold, this one's pretty straightforward. The total number of items sold in that store or department or however you want to break that down. And then the last formula here I want to talk to you guys about is the percent change formula. When we do percent change, it's really important that you have things in the correct order. And this is where students tend to make mistakes, or even people make mistakes in general. Like even for myself, I have to really think about it to make sure my order is correct. So in the numerator, you subtract your current year information minus your previous year information. So if you're looking at sales, your current year sales minus your previous year sales. And then you divide by the previous year's sales or whatever information you're focusing on. It's always of the form new minus old divided by old. And that's really important. A lot of people like to divide by the new information, and that is incorrect because you're comparing the old to the new. So your starting information is the last year or the previous number or whatever you're doing there. So that's the last formula I want to talk about for now. And then these are things, again, that you really want to keep in mind as we go through. So I'm going to just go here. You have a documentation page, and then you have a sales report. Not everything is filled in here. And I'm going to go and run through some of the steps with you, and I encourage you to go through the rest of them on your own. So in my videos, my goal is not to do every single step in the textbook. I think you guys can follow along there pretty well. It's a really nice text. I think that really goes through step by step, but I want to show you, the different parts of it, and then you can do the full version on your own. So if you're looking in your text, it does have us do a few different things. So one thing that is missing here, you'll notice, is the gross sales is missing in cell C6. So they would like us to calculate the gross sales. Now, your gross sales, remember, is anything coming in from all of those sales. So selling items. And again, we're talking about a year here. We're not doing monthly projections or anything. We're talking about a full year. So that would mean all the sales coming in from the full year. And we're looking at the entire Northwest region here. So if you scroll down, you'll actually see a lot of data. So it's broken down by month, and I can scroll to the right as well to keep seeing that. And then you also have the different stores. This is quite a large operation here for this company, or largish, right? It's not just one store or two stores. So in Washington, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 9 stores, unless I miscounted. And then they have some more in Oregon, and they also have some more in Idaho. So we're looking again at the Northwest region, and potentially there's other stores in other regions as well. But this is our focus here. So we would like to take all of these sales data. So this is your sales by store by month. So it's broken down. For instance, in January, this particular store in Washington had $359,000 in gross sales. So we would like to add all of this up together because I want to see what the outcome is for the entire year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to my gross sales, and you can see that the chart is partially set up for you, like it was already started a little bit. And I'm going to, again, use my formula. So I'm going to start with an equal sign. Formulas always start with equal signs. And then I just want to add this all up, right? I already have the monthly data for each store. I have the key pieces there, but I just need to combine it all together. So to add things up, you use the sum function. So this is one that we are going to use a lot. And if you just start typing, you'll eventually see it. And you can do it different ways. I like to just double click. So I'll double click on that, and then it's going to have me select my data. Now you can manually type in the cells here, but I think it's much easier to select them. So I'm going to just scroll down, and I'm going to select all of my data at once. So I'm going to go here from January all the way down, keep going until I get to the bottom. And then I'm also going to go all the way to the right because I want to select all my sales data. So once I have all the cells selected, and again, you can scroll up to see that they are all selected. I have the right data here. I'm going to go back. And you can see it also up here, right? It tells you your cells that you've selected. You're ready to just hit enter. And there is my gross data. So it's all added up for me, which is really nice. All right, the next thing we're going to fill in here is let's fill in our net profit or loss. Now we say profit or loss, we always hope for profit, right? So profit would be a positive value. So when I take my gross sales and I subtracted all my costs, if I get a positive value, then I have profit. If I get a negative value, that means I had loss. That means I have spent more than I made. So we don't want to be in that route, but obviously that does happen sometimes in businesses. So again, order is really important here. I'm going to start with an equal sign for my formula. And I want to start with my gross sales. So I'm going to select the cell that the gross sales are in. Remember, we don't want to type in numbers. We want to use the cells here so that if anything were to change later on, it's very quick to update. I'm not going back to manually change all these numbers. So I'm going to click the cell with the gross sales. And I need to subtract out both of my costs. Now, there's different ways that you could do that. So you could hit each one separately. So subtract this and then do minus again and subtract that one. That works. And hit enter. Or another way to do it with, which is what your book tends to like better, is it takes the gross sales, we subtract, and then what we do is we add parentheses here, and then I hit my two costs and I add those first. So we're using PEMDAS here, the order of operations. So we're saying, hey, add these costs together first. That's why they're in parentheses, and then subtract the total costs from the gross sales. They're both correct. In either case, we're still subtracting all the costs. So you have your cost of sales and you also have your operating expenses. And again, when I'm ready, I can hit enter and there's the net profit or loss. So for this current year, we have made a profit of, let's see, $5,248,000. So pretty good, right? At least I think that's pretty good. I don't know, maybe for this business, it's not good. So I don't have any of the background information to know if that is, good or not yet. All right, so let's do the same thing for here. So we could redo the formula, or we could try copying that formula. So I'm going to go ahead and copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and just paste. And then when you're done copying, you just want to double click somewhere else. And again, I just right click to use the copy and paste function, but you could do Control C for copy, for instance, and so on. So however you want to copy is perfectly fine. And then here, I do recommend always just clicking your cells and making sure you didn't make any mistakes, that the formula actually copied how you expected it to copy. So notice that the column has changed to D, which is what I wanted, right? I want to do this for the previous year as well. So now my cells are D6 minus the D7 and D8 sum instead of being C. So again, my recommendation is to just always check when you copy formulas. Sometimes they do some weird stuff that you may be not expecting. So just make sure they look good, and this one does. And you can see here we actually did better. So previous year we were still at about 5 million, but 151,000. So this year we did a little bit better, extra, about 100,000, not quite. So pretty good. All right, so let's look at some other things that your text would like us to calculate. So they would also like us to calculate the per store statistics here. So just looking at like what's happening more per store. So they want us to go to cell C15 here. And again, you can see the label has changed where it does say per store. So you're sort of looking at an average for each store instead. And what they want us to do for the first one is they want us to take the C6 data here, and they want us to divide it by whatever is in C22, which is right here. So what they did is they took the number of stores that they have for this year, which is 20, and they put that data in a cell. And again, try not to use numbers in your formulas. If you have number data, numbers, put them in a different cell. And then that way, if for some reason it has to change and now you have 21 stores, you just update that number one time. You're not changing every single formula. So they currently have 20 stores this year. So we're going to figure out sort of like the average for each store. So I'm doing gross sales here. So I'm going to start with my equal sign. I'm going to click my gross sales for everybody. And then I want to divide that by however many stores I have. So I'm going to click my cell C22 there. Again, I'm not going to use the number 20. I'm going to use the cell. And I'm going to hit enter. So you can see the average gross sales per store. And that's what we're doing in this piece here. And we're going to do the same thing with the other formulas. So I'm going to hit equals. My cost of sales is next. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide by that 22 again. So C22, hit enter. And I'm going to go down the line a couple more. Now, you may be saying, Professor Paula, why can't we just start copying this? Right? Like we're kind of doing the same thing over and over again. But again, if we copy, I'm just going to warn you guys to just be a little careful. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to try putting it here. I'm going to say, oh, let's just paste that. And something went wrong. What happened is, if you look at it, it's kind of shifting everything down because it says, oh, well, if you're shifting down, we want all the cells to shift down. So instead of dividing by C22, it's divided by C23. And there's nothing in C23. So that's why I say just check when you copy, because Excel tries to predict the pattern for you. And sometimes they don't quite get it right. Now, I do have a little trick for copying. So if you're going to be kind of doing the same thing over and over again, you can also drag this little plus sign here. And again, if you pull down, it will copy that formula above, but it does the same thing I just did, where it assumes the pattern that everything is dropping down one. Now, this is a little trick. This is not in your text. You don't have to use it if you don't like it. But there is a way to make it stay on C22. And what Excel does is it uses dollar signs for that. So if you put a dollar sign in front of your C and in front of the 22, it will tell Excel to fix this cell. Don't keep going down the line. Leave C22 as it is. And now when I go to copy, you'll see that the first one moved. So I went down to C8, which was the operating expenses, but that C22 cell stayed the same. So it's a little shortcut. Again, it's not in your text, at least not right now. But if you're kind of doing the same formula over and over again, but you need to leave something fixed, using those dollar signs will help you there. Now, if you don't like that, it's okay. You can just keep typing the formulas in. It's not a big deal, right? You can do the same thing we have been doing and kind of follow along there. And then again, we can fill in the rest of the information as well for the previous year and so on. So I'm going to let you guys kind of keep filling the rest of it in. I'm going to pause for a second there and do something a little bit different. So another thing I want to look at in this video is to show you how to do those net and percent changes like we were looking at. So again, I'm going to follow along a little bit here and go with your text, but again, I'm not going to do every single one. So you can go in on your own and kind of finish this Excel workbook afterwards and go back through your text. So I'm going to start with the net change and then the percent change. So remember, I kind of told you guys before that to get your percent change, you need your current year minus your previous year in the numerator. And then you're always going to divide that by the previous year. So we always divide by the old data instead. So I'm going to set the numerator up first as that net change, and then I'll do the division as a percent after. So here, that net change, they're referring to the actual dollar amount that's changing, not the percent. You see that in the next column. So I'm going to go ahead and set up here. And when I subtract again, I'm going to do current minus previous, or new minus old is how we subtract. So I'm going to use an equal sign here. And I'm going to select my current year. And then I'm going to subtract my previous year. And again, I'm going to hit enter. And then it's going to be the same thing all the way down. So I can hit my equal sign, my current year minus my previous year. Enter. And as you go through, again, you can start copying that down. So you can use Control Copy and paste it, or you can just use that little trick I taught you guys, get that little plus sign, and you can just drag that formula. Again, just check it, make sure it does what you want to. So the next one, if you click, you can see the formula up here. So you have C8 minus D8, which is what I want. That's the 8th row. And then here I have C9 minus D9. So it's copying down correctly. And then I can also do the items sold as well. So for my percent change, I already have the numerator set up, right? Because I already have that new minus old. So I really just need to do the division here to finish that piece. All right. So once I have this set up, I'm going to go ahead and hit the equal sign again. I'm going to select my net change, and I'm going to use a division bar and divide that by the old data, so the previous year's data, because again, I'm trying to see how it goes from old to new. And then I'm going to hit enter, and I should see that right here. And again, I can copy this down. So I'm just going to click and drag, or you can control and copy, that's fine too. Again, sometimes playing around is just a nice way to do it and figure it out. And again, here, if you like, you can just hit right-click copy or Control-C to copy. And then again, I can use a shortcut, or I can just go ahead and paste as well. And again, I always recommend you guys just give a quick check of your formulas to make sure it did what you wanted it to do. So you have all of those percentages there. And you can see that the negative is negative here because you did have a net change that was negative. So the cost of sales actually went down. So this is a good time it's to be negative because your cost of sales went down. So you were able to make more profit in that case. Now, when you do your percent, Excel is defaulting here to the decimal version because usually when we do formulas, you're using the decimal version there. So that's why you're seeing 0.03 and so on. This is, again, the decimal version, not the percent version of Excel. So if you want to see percents, you can go in and change these. That little percent sign here, right on the home and number tab, will change it to the more standard format that people are used to, or you can click it again, or you can unclick it and it will go back as well. You can also change your decimal places. So you may want to add a few extra decimal places here or decrease them. So you can kind of play around there with how you would like your information set. And again, if I don't like that percent, I can just go back to the general form. So notice I just clicked percent there and I changed to percent up here. So if I change my mind, I don't like that, I can go back to general and fix it. But that's always nice, depending on who you're presenting to. So if you're presenting to the larger community, most people don't always understand that decimal form, or they struggle a little bit with it. So it's a good chance to come in here and say, let's make these actual percents that people can see, and you see that percent symbol comes in next to it. And again, I would actually add a few decimal places in here, so that's not as much rounding. So I'll let you play around with these couple keys here, changing, again, increasing decimals versus decreasing the decimal places, and it rounds appropriately for you, which is really great. Or changing between the percent format and the general, again, depending on what your company is looking for, what you were looking for, who you're presenting to. So as we make our tables, it's always good to think about who we're presenting to when we're doing this. All right, so I think I'm just going to do one more thing here, and then we'll pause for the next video. So your book also asks you to do some additional totals. So they do ask you to kind of go down here. You can see this table goes on for quite a while, and go out here to the P column. And they would like to actually find the yearly totals. So for each store. So maybe you need to do more information, more digging into what's going on for each store. So first of all, you may want to put a title in, right? Yearly totals, for instance. You definitely want to label things in Excel, because I guarantee you're not going to remember what you were doing a week later or a month later if you have to go back to that file. So label everything. And then you can hit enter and the active cell will move down. And then we can also find the sum here for all of these values. So I can hit equals, and then sum again will add everything up. And then I'm just going to select one row at a time because I want to find the sum for each store. And I'm going to end in January. Again, you can check your formula up top to make sure you have it right. And I can scroll through and make sure I've collected everything I need to. And then when I'm ready, you can close the parentheses if you want, but you can just hit enter and you'll have those yearly totals as well. So, and then you can copy and paste that down. Let's see here. My favorite is that drag copy. So I tend to use that all the time. This tends to be one of my favorite tricks that I show students. They're like, oh my gosh, you just saved me so much time. I'm just going to drag that down. And again, just click a cell or two and make sure it is doing what it is supposed to be doing. So that looks good. I'm in the 36th row. I'm going from column C through N. So I look good, right? So again, I always say double check, make sure you haven't missed something or made a mistake. I'm just going to keep dragging that all the way down. I'll check one more cell. So here I'm seeing the 45th row with the correct column. So again, I feel pretty good that I was able to do that part okay. You can also look at the months as well. So you have the yearly total for each store there, you know, but maybe you actually want to add and figure out what's going on month to month. So I could also go down here and put a label maybe in the 46th row and say something like monthly sales. And then maybe I want to add up the months instead. So I'm going to use that sum feature. I'm going to add up my columns. So that would give me an idea of how my stores are doing month to month. So this would just be January. And then again, I can go ahead and do the same thing for my following months. And again, I prefer that click function rather than trying to write in all my cells. I think it's so much easier. And you can also copy across. And again, I recommend just checking, is it actually doing what it's supposed to do? Here I see E26 to E45. Yes, it's adding up that E column. And again, you can copy and paste however you like. If you like to right click and copy or use Control C, you can do that. And then you can again, just paste afterwards, or you can use that trick that I've been showing you, that click and drag is a really nice way to copy too. Again, my recommendation, and I'm going to say this 1,000 times, is just check your formulas. Excel predicts or tries to predict the pattern that you want. So sometimes it doesn't give you exactly what you think it's going to give you. So just double check and make sure it's doing what you want before you finalize your reports or go too far into the project.